This is the Bates Bobcast, our weekly podcast where we take a look at the week that was in Bates athletics. My name is Aaron Morse, and each week this spring we are honoring the seniors of a Bates team that did not get to finish its season due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This week, we chat with the two senior captains from the softball team, plus an interview with head coach McKell Barnes. That's coming up on the Bates Bobcast. The Bates softball team was off to a strong start to its 2020 season, going 6-2 on the program's annual trip to Florida before the season ended much too soon. Senior captains Kirsten Pelletier and Julia Panepinto were cornerstone players throughout their careers at Bates. A two-time All-NESCAC selection, Pelletier graduates as the program's all-time leader in numerous pitching categories, including strikeouts. Panepinto was not even recruited to be a softball player. The two-sport athlete played volleyball in the fall, then decided she wanted to join the softball team.
I had a conversation with the volleyball captain at that point. Her name was Jacqueline Forney. I told her I was thinking about playing softball, and so she brought me to who she knew on the softball team, and at that point it was Tori Fitzgerald, and we sat together watching a field hockey game, and she basically said that I should email Coach Barnes, and I did that, and then I had a meeting with her. It must have been in early October, and in that meeting, she basically told me that I was on the team and that I needed to fill out some paperwork, and that to go to Florida, it cost $800, and I should expect that cost moving forward, and that as soon as volleyball season was over, I would get right in with the PE class going on and the captain's practices that Tori and Maddie were running. And I immediately, my first experience after volleyball ended was catching for KP in the Great Cage. And I remember that incredibly vividly. It was awesome. We went into the Great Cage when men's lacrosse was doing their PE class with Mike Seltzer. And so it was a group of guys that neither of us were familiar with. And we just kind of asserted ourselves and put ourselves in the cage, and she started warming up, and we got to her screwball, and it was the most embarrassing catching moments for me in my life because I could not catch it. And I kept having to say, I swear I'm a catcher. I caught all my high school life. I always catch for travel, but I've never had a pitcher that has thrown a ball with so much movement. I could not do it. And I remember calling my dad that night saying, oh my God, this girl's really good, and she's my type of teammate. I was so excited to play after that experience catching for KP.
KP, what do you remember about those early days there on the team?
I remember that Julia was kind of my saving grace. We just kind of connected, and I think this program and my experience wouldn't be what it was without her. I think that particular experience kind of just speaks to who she is, right? I was this timid first year, and I was like, oh, should we go in the Great Cage? And she's like, nah, we're going. And we just kind of went in, and she gave me all the confidence that I needed, and we just kind of fed off each other from there. And in no way was she shouldn't have been embarrassed. She did fine.
Well, and Julia, you ended up finding a position there at third base. What was that process like?
It was a little nerve-wracking. I didn't like how close I was to the batter at first. It kind of freaked me out. But as soon as the opportunity opened up, I think it was the third game we were in Florida, our current third baseman got hurt. I was just so excited to get in the infield. I started in the outfield, and I am way too anxious, and the outfield was not my place to be. And so once I was given that opportunity to be in the infield, I took advantage of it and made sure I got as many infield reps as possible to make sure that I would not only play the position but really try to excel in it.
KP, take us through maybe some of your more memorable moments, looking back right now as a Bobcat, some games you won't forget, you think down the road.
Oh, my goodness. I just feel like there are so many. I think our sophomore year when we went and beat Colby, I think we might have swept Colby that year. And we beat the number of wins in a Bates softball season that year, which was really cool to be a part of. And then beating Tufts for the first time since 2007 was also a great feeling. And I remember Caroline Bass scoring the only run in that game and just seeing the smile and the intensity on her face, like, let's go, we're going to win this game. And I just, like, you just knew that we were. And just, like, that feeling. Another game was when we went and played USM last year, too. And I just personally felt like I had, like, a great game. Like, all my stuff was working and I felt good. But I think if you just look back at our career and kind of everything that happened to the program, like, I think from what it was to what it is now, I don't think you can look at it by one game. I think it's like a total change in culture. I think it's a total change in the type of people we have. And I couldn't be any more proud to be a part of that.
Excellent. And Julia, it's kind of a similar question for you. Any games in particular that stand out? I think I interviewed you after your first ever home run. Is that one of the games that stands out for you?
You know, I feel like it should be, but I actually can't remember who we were playing. And I think that is very much to the idea that I really struggle with, like, looking at my individual successes as a meter for success, because I've always been so focused on how can I help the team win. And so the win that really, or the game that really resonates most with me when I think back is that game KP was referencing, that Tufts victory, because Tufts is one of those schools that I never beat in volleyball. And so having the opportunity to beat them in softball stands out in my mind, because Williams and Amherst, we never had that opportunity in either sport. And so getting that Tufts win always stands out. And it was just such a good feeling to take a game from a team that really has been a NESCAC softball dynasty school for so long. And so that was, I think, a transition in a lot of our mindsets of, like, all right, like, Bates can beat Tufts. Bates can beat these teams. And I think it just made us all realize how capable we were.
Certainly. I was going to follow up on the volleyball piece. Being a two-sport athlete here at Bates, one in the fall, one in the spring, you know, having that experience throughout these past few years, what would you say to, you know, an incoming first year who might be considering trying two sports as well, about what it takes to succeed?
I think it all just comes down to loving it. And I think the moment that you start to second guess if you want to be doing it, I think that's the moment you should stop. I really never had a moment where I was like, you know, I don't have enough time for this, or how am I going to make this work? It was always the mindset of, like, I'm going to make this work. Now let's figure out how. And so I think that has to be your mindset if you want to play two sports, because it is a huge time commitment, not just to practices and games, but to your teammates and to lifts and making sure that every time you are there, you are present and you are ready to compete. And so I think you have to be prepared and really love each sport equally. And I think it makes it really hard when you want to give more attention to one sport than the other, because I think that would lead to a poor culture in relationship with your teammates. And so I think that's something that I've prided myself on over the last 4 years, is that I've really looked at Bates softball and volleyball as equals.
KP, how have you seen yourself grow as a pitcher these last few years?
My growth has been, like, undeniable. I think if I think back to my first year, I was not very confident. I was just not the player, and I mean person, that I am, or I was. I think being a pitcher, I kind of led by that position, just like the nature of it. And I think being a first year and an underclassman is just kind of hard, right, to come into a position and not really have the guidance of an upperclassman. So I kind of had to find that on my own within our team culture. But I think kind of as we grew, I grew as well. And I think this year having Coach Jesse, our new pitching coach, was tremendous, and I think it will continue to be for the program and for Peyton and Danielle and Jeevan next year.
Yeah, what can you tell us? I mean, we've seen those three pitch, obviously, during the time at Bates. They've gone, quite a few innings, but what do you think the next step in their development is to kind of fill this role that, you've been doing these past few years as pitching the majority of the innings for Bates?
I have no doubt in my mind that the three of them will be able to do it. I think they work together so well, and also their pitching styles kind of complement each other. So I'm very excited to see what Peyton and Jeevan do in their senior year with a lot more innings, and I can't wait to see Danielle grow as well. Danielle's just so you can never tell what she's feeling on the mound, and I think that's such an important part of being a pitcher, and I'm just so excited to see what she does in the next 2 years.
Great. And Julia, I understand the team had the final Zoom meeting of the term, I guess, with May, coming to the middle of May here. What was that like to talk to everyone? I mean, obviously it's disappointing to be separated, but what's it like connecting with your teammates still here during the spring despite not having any games?
It's really bittersweet. I really still can't wrap my head around the fact that my Bates softball, let alone Bates athletics career is over, and just looking at them all in these little boxes on my computer is surreal, because knowing for the past 3 years what we should be doing right now and hanging out and enjoying what could be the end of a really exciting season. Like, this would be the NCAAs and postseason for us, and I really thought we had the potential to get there this season. And so looking at the 18 of them on my computer just doesn't feel right, because we worked so hard to get to the point we were at this year, that for it all to end like this is just, it's so disappointing.
And KP, I imagine you have similar feelings about that in terms of, this team and everything.
Yeah, of course. I think I mentioned before, the change of culture that we had throughout our 4 years, and I really think this was kind of the culminating year for Julia and I, and I think we all expected kind of big things, and to wrap up being on our computers, Zooming with each other. I think it's tough, and but it's also something that everyone's going through. It is really tough. I think it's hard to accept that it is all over, for sure.
Well, Julia, any final thoughts you want to share about your time as, a Bates softball player, student athlete, maybe in general? I mean, I know you were very active, off the field as well, in different activities that you wanted to, maybe talk about before we sign off here.
Yeah, I think my closing words would be that there is no better way to spend your 4 years in college than on a team, and I think the Bates softball team was exceptional when it came to that, because when KP and I were first years, there were 5 of us, and it dwindled down to just the 2 of us, and I think the relationship we grew and the leadership potential that we now see on the team and how we grew as leaders as well is just so meaningful for what we are going to do in the rest of our lives, and the way we were able to take a team that, was excited with winning one NESCAC game our freshman year to having a team that was thinking about the NCAA tournament is just such an accomplishment that I know I'll be able to take with me throughout my life, and it's just a level of resiliency that is going to be so valuable for me wherever I go.
Great. KP, how about for you? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely echo what Julia said. The amount that we grew on the field and off, I think, is tremendous, and there's really nothing better than being a Bobcat. I know that sounds super cheesy, but the community that we're a part of and that's continuing to grow in Bates athletics, it's so meaningful to be a part of. And I can't thank Coach and I can't thank her enough, and our coaching staff enough, for always sticking with me and being just being there for me through all of it. I think I had a really tough freshman year just as a whole, and just sticking at Bates and really finding what it meant to be a leader and a part of the program. I'm just so grateful for it, and I'm so thankful for Celine and Jason and the whole athletic department at Bates as well. I think they've really nailed down what it means to be a student athlete at Bates. So, and of course, I couldn't be here without like the teammates that we have and the relationships that I gained, and I'm just so thankful for all of my teammates. I think, and specifically Julia, I just think we're a part of something special for sure.
Bates softball head coach McKell Barnes considers Pelletier and Panepinto to be two of the most impactful seniors in the softball program's recent history.
Obviously, it's been program changing. When KP entered her first year, we were coming off, I believe, probably the worst season in program history. And we were able to immediately turn the page and turn the corner. And KP was the catalyst in that. She was program changing. She was, career changing for me as far as just learning how to coach a player of that caliber. Just very, very grateful that she's been a part of our program and been able to lead us to where we're at today.
Did you have a sense when you were recruiting her that she could be that kind of difference maker? I mean, is that something you were feeling right off the bat?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had coached KP briefly during a travel ball I think it was 2 years prior possibly. So her and I had established a relationship before Bates, and she was familiar with me and my style, and I was obviously very familiar with her and her style of play, but most importantly, who she was. And she was the type of just person and personality that we wanted to recruit to change our program. She was committed. She outworks everyone in the room. She's the first there. She's the last to leave. She's exactly who you would want on your team, and especially on your team when you're trying to change a program from, really, really bad to very good where we're at today. So I was very familiar with KP. She was very familiar with me. And I think that certainly was a huge catalyst in being able to, because she was obviously highly recruited by other programs. Flew under the radar a little bit. Being from Maine, it's hard to get some of that exposure, but we were lucky to be able to get her for sure.
You played so many games in softball, but any particular games that really stand out to you that KP, what really embodied what she meant in terms of tough opponents or great performances? Obviously, she threw multiple no-hitters, but any games that really stand out to you?
Yeah, I can think of, obviously I think it was 2 years ago we beat Tufts a 1-0, close 1-0 game, and KP's performance on the mound that day was beyond tremendous. And to get that final out, I remember I think she threw a back-to-back changeup. One was a swing and a miss, and then the other one, slow ground ball back to her, and she was able to, I think it was back to the first baseman. But anyways, that game in particular stands out. That was, I think it was a gutsy performance. I think it was completely unexpected from our opponent. And I think that's when we really started to see that was kind of a defining moment for us in our program, where we were able to really see, like, wow, we have turned that page and look where we're at now, and why not us? And we understood that it was no longer, David versus Goliath, that we were right there with the top of the top. There was another performance against Bowdoin a few years ago. We ended up losing that game, but KP had actually had a rib that had popped out, and she muscled through it, and she powered through it. I have to imagine in extreme amount of pain, and it was just, it was one of those things like, hey, like, whatever you can give us, we'll take, because You at your 50% is still going to put us in a good position. I think we ended up losing that game, but just her ability to just go out and compete and give everything that she had is truly remarkable, and also what sets her, I think, above other players that we've had come through the program, but other players across the conference as well.
And then Julia Panepinto, 2 seniors on the softball team this year, and talk about 2 impactful players. I mean, Julia, we've often talked about, she's a 2-sport athlete here at Bates, volleyball and softball, made a big impact for both programs. So from a softball perspective, obviously it was nice to see her really develop that power because you knew she was strong, and then she developed it for softball, right? How did that process kind of go over the 3+ years?
Yeah, Julia came in and she had played, a little bit of travel softball ahead of time, but also being a 2-sport athlete, I think, she didn't come into Bates thinking that she was going to play softball. She wasn't recruited, and she came into my office and was like, "Hey, Coach, I'm thinking about playing softball. Here's a little bit about me." And I could just feel her energy the moment that I met her. And I said to her, "Great, you're on the team." And she was like, "Wait, you haven't even seen me play." But that, at the time where the program was at, it was, she had a vibe and she had an energy. And I was like, you know what, if this kid's willing to put in the work, albeit she was a little raw at first, but she's a workhorse. And she has this natural athletic ability where we were able to give her, obviously, some small fundamental things that were able to make a huge difference in her game. And I think, for her in particular, throughout her career, she had, displayed great power, obviously just the ball rifled off her barrel, super, super strong. And one thing that we had been working up towards for this year was getting more consistency with that. And I think that, we were going to see that this was really going to be her year to shine with that consistency and that power. And unfortunately, obviously cut short. But Julia put in the work, and she wanted to get better no matter what it was. She was extremely accountable, very self-aware of her performance, very self-aware of her, mentality, and truly a great competitor. And I knew from the moment I met her that she was someone that we wanted in the program, despite the fact that I had never seen her play. And as it turns out, what a unbelievable opportunity for her to just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about playing," and it turned out tremendous, obviously.
That's really interesting because I know, depending on the sport here at Bates, track and field, obviously a huge roster, long line of tradition of, what they call, unrecruited kind of walk-ons joining the program, making an impact. Is that more rare maybe in softball just because it is a smaller roster to begin with, kind of? I mean, and you have to be careful about, how many spots you have and everything. Is Julia kind of a rare case, just kind of walking on and making an impact like that?
At the time when she was a first year, we had actually quite a few walk-ons. So just interestingly, it wasn't until, just because of the timing of when I was hired, it wasn't until my 3rd season before I had my first recruited class. So my first 3 years here, we had to have a lot of walk-ons just because I was 2 cycles behind in recruiting because I was hired mid-January. So our season essentially started 3 weeks from my hiring date. But that missed 2 recruiting classes. So we had a lot of walk-ons at the time. Where we're at now, I think we have maybe 1. So it's definitely a lot more rare. And in Julia's case, she was one of the walk-ons that probably not much of an opportunity now, just because we're at larger roster numbers, and to your point, it does make it a lot more challenging. Obviously, with the subbing rules in our sport, we don't have as much fluidity as there is in other sports.
What do you remember about the early days? Some fundamental things you're working with her on, but after she joined the team, what was your impression when you actually did first see her play?
Another funny story. So my first impression of Julia was just how super strong of an arm she had. She had a cannon. So naturally you think like, oh, an outfielder, right? She had decent, accuracy with her arm. And so we put her in right field, I believe it was. Left field maybe. I can't remember exactly, but it was, and Julia, don't kill me for saying this, but it was disastrous. It did not go all that well, and I think we then had an injury at third base, and so we knew we wanted to be able to utilize her arm, so we slid her into that corner spot within, I think it was like maybe 1 or 2 games down in Florida, our first couple games of the season, and she was just so much more natural at third base, and you could totally tell that was a tremendous spot for her. She came in catching, that was a big position of hers before she came to Bates. At the time, we had Tori Fitzgerald who was catching mostly, and so we really needed to fill other positions. And with that injury at third base, it was kind of this serendipitous. It just ended up working out really, really well. Julia was able to slide in and just really be a huge asset for us defensively on that corner. That's a hot corner, and she played it fearlessly, which is really, really impressive. And we've been working on this year, being able to field the ball off her right foot and change her throwing slot and make the throw to first base, and that was something that we always had fun with, and she was getting there. I wish that she could have, this year made a play being able to do that. But so that was kind of a funny where Julia started out in the outfield to where she finished, just being a solid third baseman for us for for 3 years. We're really going to miss her.
Yeah, I'm remembering a play she made. I think it might have been a bunt attempt. I'm not sure. It was a pop-up from third base side. She made a diving catch and then doubled up the runner.
Yes, yep. Yeah, it was a foul ball with a run on first base, and she made a diving catch. It kind of actually it's a little similar to, I don't know if you remember when Florida State won the World Series, I believe it was maybe 3 years ago, and their third baseman, Jesse Warren, similarly made in the 7th inning, I think there was no outs with a runner on first base, 1-run game, bunt play, pop up, third baseman for Florida State, diving catch, pick the runner off. It was very, very similar, just a little bit of a different angle for Julia's. I would even argue a little bit more challenging as it was a foul ball. But yeah, she's a special athlete, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was a memorable play. Any other kind of memorable games involving Julia that you remember?
Julia came up with some huge hits for us. Some big-time home runs. I believe it was against Colby a couple years ago, and last year as well, where she came up with huge hits. She had a grand slam against UMF last year, I believe. That she when she stepped into the box, we knew that we had a chance. We knew that with runners on base, she was exactly who we wanted in that position. Don't throw her a changeup, and we can say that now, but don't throw her a changeup because, well, actually, you might want to throw her a changeup in that position, but that was really the only pitch that she struggled with. But we knew, she would make that adjustment and give us a really good chance. Certainly, and these two, both really strong leaders in kind of their own ways, right? Julia maybe more vocal and KP more of a lead by example. Is that fair? Yeah, 100%. They really, really understood their leadership qualities and to their strengths and what worked well, and then they were able to blend that with each other. I mean, they really worked well together. They communicated effectively with one another. They held each other accountable. It was always a super fun battle in practice when Julia would try to hit off KP, and you would get Julia's best up at bat, and you would get KP's best on the mound. And that was really special to watch, and that was something that I think, to see their teammates be able to dive into and lean into and say, like, wow, this is the kind of competitor that I want to be. Their leadership styles were truly, truly special, and they were able to blend them so well together, and that has been unbelievable for our program, and I can't even put it into words. I'm really, really going to miss them as people. I'm really going to miss them as leaders and certainly competitors. But above all else, they're two special young women, and couldn't be more proud of them.
And pitcher, obviously, so crucial in softball. Complete games are a fairly regular occurrence if things are going well. But, I mean, KP, what do you think the younger pitchers on the roster, you've got 3 of them, I believe, right, learn from her, or were there things maybe that she had that you really can't teach, perhaps?
KP was fearless. It didn't matter who we were playing against. She had the mindset that, I want the ball. I want the ball in any situation. She, even if she was feeling nerves, you didn't ever know. And she had this presence on the mound that was certainly much bigger than her physically, because she's pretty tiny. But her presence is unmatched. I mean, she truly give me the ball in any situation against any hitter, and she went into attack mode, and that was special. That was special to see, and I hope that the other pitchers who are younger than her are able to mimic that presence, or at least try to take some of that and run with it, because that's what separated her. I mean, obviously her skill set was tremendous, and she was able to throw any pitch in any situation. But I think she was able to do that too because her confidence in her craft is not matched. And, she knew that she was the one that we needed, and she really owned that. And she owned, that was her circle, and no one was going to beat her.
Absolutely. Well, any other thoughts you want to share on either of these terrific seniors that we haven't gotten to talk about yet?
I'll say this, Aaron, that Julia and KP, albeit, a huge impact for our program, truly, like I said, immeasurable. We can't it's really difficult to put into words, but in addition to that, what they've done for the Bates community, what they've done for the Lewiston Auburn community, is, I would encourage anyone who's listening to this Bobcast to really look into what KP and Julia have done for their surrounding communities. They are endlessly giving. They raise the bar. They set the standard for just how to be kind and caring and humane and philanthropic, and they want to compete, and they use, I think, softball as a vehicle to be able to do that. They give back to the youth. They're the first to show up and the last to leave. And there's really special student athletes who don't come around too often. And so I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to try to emulate some of what KP and Julia are, because if you're doing a quarter of what they did, then you're on the right track, and you'll be in a good place, because they're special, and they mean a lot to me. They mean a lot to our program, and I certainly I would be remiss if I said that they, what they've given back, and how we acknowledge that and appreciate that is something that, we should all be looking at as well.
All right, McKell Barnes, thank you so much for joining us on the Bobcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Next time on the Bates Bobcast, we'll salute the seniors from the women's and men's tennis teams, plus an interview with head coach Paul Gassingay. That's next time on the Bates Bobcast.